Police should never be sent to a house for a mental health check or anything regarding mental health without the proper training.
Welcome back to Georgia on My Mic. I'm Zay.
I'm Juan.
I'm Caroline. And in this upcoming week in Atlanta, we've got a pretty busy week with some sports going on. NBA is still in town with playing the 76ers at 6 o'clock on Saturday. And then we have the home opener for Atlanta United. I've never been to a game, but I've heard that they're super fun. 7:30 on Saturday as well at Mercedes-Benz, and heard it's a great time and good environment. And then we also have an oyster and crawfish boil that's happening at Park Tavern on Saturday, 2 to 11 p.m. Tickets are $25. Live music DJ, should be a great time, and just good to get out and get in the community and meet some people.
You know what's crazy, dude? I've never been to a seafood boil or an oyster boil. Like, is it just all you can eat? Sort of like, is that what that is?
Kind of. I mean, they had like one in KSU when we went. Like they have one like one a year.
You throw like corn in there. Well, and they have Angry Crab or something that's by us.
Like Juicy Crab.
Juicy Crab, that's what.
I actually have never been to Juicy Crab.
You should go.
Is it good?
It's pretty good, but it's messy. That's the only thing.
They give you like gloves. They give you like a full suit.
But it's so expensive, right?
Probably not compared to like if you get crab legs or things in Florida, yes, but in Georgia, probably not. It's messy.
So let me see if I got this right. A seafood boil basically is like a giant plastic tarp or like a pot, and people just throw things in there and hope that it mixes.
They usually dump it out, put butter, seasoning, all that stuff on it. And people I personally don't even like seafood that much, but the crawfish I've had it in Alabama with some friends. They did a crawfish boil. It was actually pretty good. It's kind of like a game though. You're having to like fight for your food, having to like crack it open. It's like it's kind of a journey.
Crawfish I've never eaten, but I have eaten like oysters and crab. And the problem is that it looks so fancy, but there's not a lot of meat in those shellfish. Like it's kind of like it just depends on your patience.
I want to get back to this fighting. How are there no casualties in these things? Do you have to buy extra insurance to make sure that everyone's covered?
There probably are some casualties at like family reunion. If you've ever been.
Or like Mardi Gras, big events in Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana itself gets pretty crazy.
Bourbon Street for sure.
Yeah, no, Bourbon Street especially. I mean, a couple years ago when they had that guy driving down the street and things like that. I mean, just, you really see it with some of these, especially even the other day, shootings and different things, just kind of, I think, shows the mental health crisis we have, like, through the United States right now and the world as a whole, but specifically here.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, you have to think about it, specifically with all the world events that we're seeing right now, along with, just the state of where the generational divide is with things. I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, the baby boomer generation was only maybe about 60 years ago. Think about how drastically different their upbringing was, compared to Gen Z, Gen Alpha, even millennials. And, just the ways that mental health has been handled over the years has completely evolved. In some ways for the better, but in some ways, I think that there could be an argument that also, some of the older ways could be, some of those things need to be preserved. It's interesting.
But one of the older ways, right? I heard that they used to, if you thought somebody was loony, and I think they did this more to women because, they're old school back in the 30s. And, I thought that they would just like do like some sort of head surgery on them and whoop, they're just okay.
So that's a lobotomy. So that's not what I'm talking about, by the way. But, the Kennedys, they did that. Joseph Kennedy, which was, the Kennedy patriarch. One of the daughters, name was Rose, had, she just had a really troubled like teenage life and early adulthood. And what they did, because they figured they couldn't fix it, was they made her get a lobotomy, and it screwed her up for the rest of her life. Like she essentially could not speak, I think, and she was like impaired until like she passed away in like her 80s. So like it's interesting when you just take that into account. Like this is what, and also just the intersectionality of the identities. These are what like privileged families, back then how they dealt with it. A lot of it was that they kept it quiet, because when you're a family like that in the limelight, you have it's kind of and especially mental health challenges are definitely more seen as like a shameful thing, and so they would try to take care of it in these quiet ways, but they're actually horrific.
Well, and I think something that isn't talked about and just isn't in general is a lot of people have come out and said there's so many more people that are diagnosed with anxiety or depression or things now, like what's changed, what's this. But I think what comes to it is that we're better at diagnosing things. Just the research, the acknowledgement, kind of like you said, it was shameful. It's they're struggling with something. Instead of how can we help, it was more how can I move you away so that you don't embarrass me or don't put this in our family or make a mistake or like you said, have a troubled child, things like that. So I think that's definitely something that as we have grown up more, and I know with my age, our age and things like that, it mental health being taken more seriously as a legitimate thing and as a legitimate struggle, even with work and things like that. You'll see mental health days and people taking things like that. And I think it's really important to prioritize because, I mean, like you said with lobotomy, but like with a lot of things, I mean, your mind is what you've got. And
yeah, for sure. I mean, like, even with like, one thing that I notice for sure, and I talk with even my parents or my grandparents about a lot is, for example, they're like very critical of how much like, people in their 20s travel, compared to, just sort of like
saying we don't work hard anymore.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
the boomer hating on us again.
Well, and the thing is like just
it's like, no, it's not that we're not responsible. It's just that we have more value in trying to enjoy our life, actually enjoy it.
Work-life balance.
Yeah.
Instead of everything we hear, Gen Zs are lazy, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, get up, like boots to the ground, get going, things like that. And part of it I've said with technology is sometimes I just do things quicker than people older than me because I know how to do it on my phone or I know how like ChatGPT or whatever it is to get, and I just do it more efficiently. So then I have time to go do other things that I enjoy doing. And so I am definitely work-life balance and love traveling. So I definitely hear the
Well, I mean, it's just kind of like, I think that a lot of, especially because our like, the younger generations also, the younger that, the more generations that have come, the less children that, the birth rates have declined a little bit.
Oh, right.
And so one thing that I notice is the correlation between, the new generations and having children later. And, I wonder often if that sentiment from like, the boomer generation or even, Gen X, millennials, I wonder if a lot of that comes from maybe Gen Z or, younger millennials are doing things differently in ways that maybe they wish they had. Because when you think about it in a lot of ways, especially like the older you are, especially if you were a woman back then, once you had a child, that was it. I mean, in a lot of ways, especially like, I mean, if we're talking about, prior to like the 70s or 80s,
Right.
That was it, even for men. I mean, in some ways, I mean, definitely have more advantages, but like in a lot of ways, even now, once you have a child, like your whole life changes. Or, you get married, it's going to be so different. And now I wonder if that is, I don't want to say more of a generational resentment, but like, I wonder if that contributes to this attitude of, oh, you're entitled and all of this,
Okay, so I'm the millennial in the group. You guys are Gen Zers, right? Okay, so when I was younger and I was growing up, I would get that criticism. Oh, you millennials are lazy. You guys are bums. Anyways, help me turn on the Wi-Fi. Even though it's just like you press one button and you're a wizard. But I remember that was a criticism of us. And now that I'm growing up, I am kind of seeing some things that are slightly sus about Gen Alpha. So I kind of feel like I'm falling into the trap because as soon as I heard, 6'7", I was like, ah. And then I realized, am I getting old? Am I now becoming that critiquing boomer to the next generation? Or is that legitimately dumb?
Let me tell you this. I'm a Gen Z and I'm critical of Gen Alpha. I mean,
Every generation, because anytime I would talk about that with my parents, they always said every generation had something bad to say about each other. They were like, that's never changed. It's always been that way. So it's been, but kind of back to what Zay was saying with like the baby boomers and stuff, you also have like the mental health of like the Great Depression of going through that and just like so and a number of wars, but then also just like recent post-war, which we obviously have not lived through a lot of that stuff. And so I think it can't be understated, like especially like the Vietnam War and things like that, the PTSD that you come back with from mental health. And I actually just finished a book about the Vietnam War and just like the horrible things that were said to them when they came back from war and things like that when and so it's like your mental health and PTSD from that situation is already so bad. Yeah. And then to come back to your home country and be railroaded and said like horrible things to you, yelled at, spit at, like it's just really, I don't think you can understate how much of an effect that will have on people in the long run. Just, I think you see that with the mental health crisis and just lack of veterans opportunities for like veteran affairs, harder, especially with I know with the Vietnam War, it was with women getting resources and things like that. And so getting the actual like care that they need and just people in general with therapy. It's not super accessible in the US for a lot of like lower income families or just people in general. Finding a good therapist, finding a good one that's in a good price point. I know some jobs are like my job personally, like gives you I think 12 free therapy sessions a year and stuff, and I'm seeing that a little bit more, which I think is like a fantastic step in the right direction because therapy was kind of a taboo for so many people and it's seen as a weakness, but really I feel like it's one of the stronger things you can do is to realize that can't figure out everything on your own and asking for help's okay.
I think that's the missing piece that I think, even in the 90s, the 80s, a lot of this was taboo, just even recently, even the 2000s. I mean, I somewhat remember the late 2000s. I mean, I was in elementary school, but, I don't even recall, there being talk about, a lot of different, disabilities, mental disabilities or mental illnesses, and in ways that, I would say that was more so talked about when I was in high school.
And even learning disabilities, dyslexia, things like that so many people lived with and had no idea they had it and did terrible on tests. And you're like, they're smart. What's happening? And then it's all coming
I remember
down,
like on Disney, like I think like Bella
Thorne.
Yeah, it had like this kind of like intermission commercial. And it was kind of like framed as like it being like just this tragic thing. But then when you learn about like what dyslexia is, it's like, why? You just kind of wonder with some of these things, like this should have never been a just scary thing to talk about. You know what I mean?
I've got so personally, culturally, I grew up around like old school Hispanic men, Hispanic like traditional stuff, and the extent that we treated mental health was just somebody telling us, toughen up, Buttercup, and here's a beer. Granted, I was like 15 at the time, but Mexican. I didn't drink the beer, but I was offered beer by other workers. Yeah. So I'm wondering if that's just like a cultural thing or if it's like an age thing.
I think it's a cultural thing too, for sure. I mean, I think when you take into account that, you look at all the history of like every culture, right? So like, I know with the Black American culture, like mental health still to this day is very, depending. I mean, the younger you are, the generally the more open you are about it. It's not really as taboo. But like, I can tell you, like with older generations, like it's just pray about it, or like you said, toughen up. Like it's just kind of like one of those two things. Usually, it's a very big stigma, and you have to think about it. A lot of it just comes from the fact that you're never really allowed to. And you're just conditioned it to be well, essentially nobody cares anyway, so you just got to deal with it yourself. So I think that, especially at least from the Black American experience, that's probably what it is for a lot of families, especially if you come from a rural area. Rural areas, lower income,
And
really
it's-
regardless of race, that really matters. But I would say it varies.
Yeah. Well, education, I think, is a huge thing. Is so many people are unaware of it and stuff like that. And I think it definitely is also like a gender thing of men versus women of like, and not only because I know from a personal standpoint, I'm not bothered by like, I think it's actually, like I said, very strong to go to therapy and show that you want to better yourself mentally and things like that. But I think men give each other a lot, having two brothers, give each other a hard time and things when you do struggle. And so it's, I think, something that is getting better, but still has a long way to go with men's mental health. And, like you said, kind of suck it up. It's fine. No one wants to hear about it. People don't want to trauma dump. So that's like, so I do get that. You can definitely talk to people too much about things and you can, overstate stuff, or you have the people that are dramatic about certain situations, but then you have a lot of serious issues that are
That's
never
something
talked about.
that you pointed out, like kind of how men treat other men when it comes to mental health, or just being okay. Like I think every man in the world has probably found themselves in a situation where they're scared to open up, especially to another guy. And so that's not talked about because, I think a lot of guys too are guilty of it with their friends, with their cousins, with their brothers, of like, when they're sad, just kind of like throwing a joke at them when they're down. I mean, we're all guilty of it. Yeah. But when you think about it, it just continually reinforces sort of the issue, and so it's something that we have to keep making strides in. I think by advancing our just general acceptance of mental health being a thing, by putting more funding and resources into it, not just for healthcare in general, but mental health specifically. Caroline knows a little bit about this one, because we went to KSU together, but that was one of the big things that I worked on when I was a student government president there, was really trying to expand mental health services. And we did get it done, for all universities, but it was only for 2 fiscal years. And so it's something that needs to be codified and permanent. And I mean, a lot of the issue with mental health is also similar to the general healthcare issue, and that's you have say 10 providers trying to care for 50 people. In the context of universities, it's usually 10, 15 counselors trying to care for thousands. So it's just one of those things that I think that we're aware of, but we still need to continue to make strides and put work into it.
And when you said that 10, 15 people trying to care for thousands, that's probably just the people who admit it, or
Right.
who recognize they have yeah. So, not a fun story, a story. When I was in high school, I had 2 brothers, right? Not like blood brothers, but like brothers. And we would joke around about how in the future we're gonna be ballers, we're gonna be in suits, we're gonna have these cars, and we're gonna do great things. And come 2014, one of them, you know, passed away, and he got hit by a train. So the speculation is, he had mental health issues that he never addressed. But back then, again, my generation, we didn't take it as seriously as you guys did. So I think the first thing that we need to do as a society, or as friends of each other, is say, hey, listen, I can tell something's off. I'm not going to be too intrusive. But if you need a friend, you have a friend, and to be conscious about it. Because, who knows how many lives we could save? Who knows how many people are out there who just simply just feel a certain way, but don't know what it is. If we can at least conceptualize it, maybe we can help others, or maybe you guys can help your friends and families. I know for me, I tried, anytime somebody needs help, I try to be there for them. I try my best. That's not, it doesn't work out every time. Sometimes I can't, even if I am there, I can't help them. But I think we need to get into the culture of acknowledging mental health as a problem, and only we as each other can not diagnose it, but like be there for each other.
Be present and be available. Because that's the thing too, is understanding. I have so many friends that go through things that I know nothing about. And even if they don't, even if they tell me all the details, it's still like, it just, even a simple example is like, my parents aren't separated. I have plenty of friends whose parents are. I personally cannot relate to them, but I can still sit there and be empathetic and listen and help them in whatever other way I can. And I think I see that kind of in the same side of your stories. Athletes. I was a student athlete in college. I played volleyball, and it's kind of where you see the toughen up, it's fine, you're this. That's college athletics. On tons of teams, you see coaches talk about it, making players play through injuries, do things like that. And mental health is something that, like playing, I know I have anxiety. And so I know that like games and different things, like how important and how hard mental health can be. I mean, people call it the yips in baseball, of like, just like pretty much a mental break that you can't. I mean, you'll have second basemen that are MLB players throwing it 10 feet over first base. It's just like amazing, the mental side of sports and mental emotion, really. And like, there's studies that show that like 1/3 of athletes struggle with mental health. I honestly would think it's more, to be, especially at a high level, but also how many are actually getting help? Like you said, how many are just, everyone feels this way. Everyone feels this way. It's kind of like making it seem like a regular thing. And I know specifically a book I've read called What Made Maddie Run. She was a runner at Penn and committed suicide. And it's, you look at her on the outside and she had the whole world. She was running and was like killing it and doing awesome and had a great success, and academically was at Penn, one of the best universities in the country, and you have no idea what's going on. And so I think that's kind of where you go as well, of being there for someone, but also being kind to everyone, because you really don't know what they're going through in their day by day. You don't know who you're walking past that day. And so I think that's just something as a whole, like, especially in the country right now, is just having the empathy and the compassion for other people.
One of the biggest things that I really realized, especially, within the past couple of years, is that there is nobody on earth where they have everything going perfectly. It's kind of like where you were getting into. You have, the experience of being an athlete and dealing with that pressure and the mental health of that. I think most, some people have lost a parent. Some people's parents are divorced. Some people, grew up in abusive households. Some people have lost friends tragically. Some people live alone. Lost their family. Like, it's just so many things that to where it can no longer be just something that's ignored. I mean, like I said, everybody has something that they've lost or dealt with, and it's not perfect for anybody. So I think that really goes into it, where we all, should be able to relate to maybe not the specific situation, but just the fundamental principle of there's something always just affecting us negatively.
See, when you said nobody has their lives completely together, that reminded me of like two very famous examples. So like, Robin Williams, he was one of the funniest people like on earth. He was Patch Adams. You guys know who that is? Patch Adams. Oh, so Patch Adams is a doctor, and his whole shtick, like I think he worked in the child cancer ward. So his whole thing was, I'm gonna go cure the world with laughter. Like that was he played that. He's famous for that character, and he was a genie. He was just a very up-spirited person, and one day he just ends it all, and nobody knows why. No, well, I mean, nobody knew why at the time, but it turns out he had mental health problems. Him and like Anthony Bourdain, who had the coolest job in the world. You go out, you eat delicious foods, and you see great things, and then just out of nowhere.
I remember that year. I think that year it was like Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade. Both
Kate Spade was a big one.
They ended their lives like within a couple of weeks, I think. Like it was
Kate, I remember Kate Spade.
So like that's what you touched on. I mean, especially people who are in positions where they feel like they have some sort of responsibility, whether that be athletics, whether that be acting, business, government leadership. It's a lot of the time. I think a lot of people feel that they have to put on a strong face in order to be in those capacities. But I think that it inspires a lot of people when you just can be human and acknowledge that, you know, you need help, or, I need to talk to someone.
And I think that's too where in the US, where you kind of are seeing other countries stepping up in better ways with their mental health resources, with the acknowledgement of it, with the funding from the government for it. And I think that's somewhere where the US needs vast improvement of acknowledging it, but then also, great, we can talk about it, but what are we going to do about it?
Oh, yeah.
Is acknowledging this, but where are we going to, like I said, make therapy or things more affordable? Prep therapists better. You have like so many different personalities, so many different mental health things, not just anxiety and depression. You have PTSD, you have eating disorders, you have so many different facets that one therapist can't be a catch-all and handle all of those things. That's not going to be. It's kind of like, you don't want a pediatrician doing brain surgery. That's not what they studied. So it's that is something where I think the US just really has to continue to grow, and the government, I think, just has to step in.
You look at like a lot of those European countries. I mean, fundamentally, they, at least in, I guess, in the perceived value system of like what they value in, society and whatnot, they're generally the same as the U.S. as far as tip for the most part. When we find liberty, freedom, all of that. But one thing that they have nailed down is making sure that people are thriving in their lives, not only financially, but mentally.
Physically is a big one.
Physically as well. And I mean, look at their crime rates, for example. Look at, their general happiness, their, all sorts of things. And you wonder, what are they doing that we're not? And I think that mental health is definitely one of the top things that they're doing a lot better, especially when it comes to the crime piece. I mean, I think that, that's a whole different rabbit hole with, well, what do we do about rehabilitation, things like that. But certainly, I think that's something that they've nailed down perfectly.
So if the first step to fixing a mental health problem is, acknowledging it, we're probably just still at that stage, right? Like just as a country, maybe not necessarily as a world. It appears that maybe like the Nordic countries have pretty high like levels of mental healthness, health well-being. But what I'm curious to know what it would look like for really high stress jobs that we need to be done. Because truth is, when let's say you're a police officer or a surgeon or a firefighter, nobody cares the toll that it has on you, only that you do the job or you don't.
Right.
So I'm curious to see like, how we're handling that with, again, these high stress jobs now and what we could actually do better.
And I think shifting their responsibilities, like cops do not need to be responding to a 12-year-old child having a mental breakdown, anxiety attack. That's where I think other countries I've heard, and I don't know exactly which ones, but have mental health specialists on their force. So that's who responds to that. So it's not someone that's untrained, but you can't just usually speed dial therapists. So it's someone who's within their police department, but isn't just a regular officer. Because I know, I was going to say there's a number of big cities especially that are getting into that, because it's not the same thing. I mean, you're de-escalating a situation and kind of, again, like needing to talk through it with them rather than an actual crime is being committed or someone needs to be saved. Internal fight. And so that's, I think, a big step in the right direction, is not expecting people to be professionals at things that they're not capable of. And I mean, that's the same thing of sending firefighters, sending anyone, like to do something that they're not used to doing. It's, I think, a way to save money within departments and not have to have other staff and people. But I think it makes a huge difference for those situations. And I think volunteering and like getting out in the community from a mental health standpoint is huge. I know personally, like volunteering, going out, meeting new people, again, getting away from phones, technology, things that can really be draining and make you fall into comparison. And so like, I know Zay volunteers a good amount and enjoys it.
Yeah, well, I spent the past few years doing stuff with the Red Cross off and on. I mean, I did a lot more when I was during my days in college. I just picked up, my laptop one day and I was like, I'm a volunteer. Next thing you know, they're asking me to restart the KSU American Red Cross chapter. And yeah, I mean, it's that easy. You just go on the American Red Cross website and you go ahead and just sign up to volunteer. They have so many different opportunities, whether that be whatever you want to do. I mean, they do a lot of stuff with humanitarian aid after like natural disasters. I know they did a lot with after Hurricane Helene, especially in the South, and I mean, they have blood drives. That's typically the easiest thing and the most convenient thing for most people. And you get a nice little snack after. But it's very easy. American Red Cross is a great organization. They've been around for over 100 years now, I believe, almost 100 years at least.
Do they have anything for people who are scared of needles?
Yeah, they have like all sorts of things. I mean, they have like if you want to learn how to do like CPR, like
Really?
that. Yeah, they have that. I mean, they have
like
donations,
disaster recovery,
all sorts of
like
things.
that,
So yeah,
Okay, so it's kind of like a little, I guess like a little kind of National Guard. Because when you said the whole like emergency response, I'm thinking like, do you guys actually go out there and sandbag the stuff, or like?
I don't like they're not doing stuff like National Guard sort of things, but they are doing things like cleaning up, debris and
helping rebuild.
helping rebuild things like that.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, American Red Cross is a great organization.
Yeah, well, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Georgia on My Mic. Get out in Atlanta and go explore.